This week, Clive Firth from Great Bar, Birmingham is my guest at my workshop in Hebden Bridge. He's made the journey to Yorkshire with his beloved 1977 Goldwing Trike. Clive has to ride a trike due to a leg injury 30 years ago, which means he can't hold a solo bike weight. But the machine that gives him so much freedom has got many a grumble. So let's find out what these are, and let's start the programme with a solid diagnosis of what is wrong. Whoa, that's quite a beast, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it.
Well, fantastic. Honda Goldwing Trike, eh?
Yeah, sound all right.
Sounds beautiful, yeah. What's it like to ride?
She's fun to ride. She's,
yeah.
handles nice. I think she handles nice anyway.
Yeah.
I just think she's lacking something in the power.
Right.
I just feel 1,000 engines should just pull a bit better.
Right.
And I'm starting to notice now that she smells sweet, as if, you know, rich, as if she's just burning petrol.
Right, so she might need a little bit of TLC and perhaps just a little bit of fettling to make
something like that, yeah. Or we could shoot it, couldn't we?
I hope we won't come to that, Clive, I'm sure it won't. Shall we have a go at getting her in the workshop so we can sort it out?
Yeah.
OK. Clive's Trike is based on the now legendary Honda Goldwing, although at its launch in 1974 at the Cologne Bike Show, its legendary future actually wasn't assured. In fact, the first Honda Goldwing didn't really know what it was meant to be. The flat four-cylinder GL1000 didn't really fit into any class. It was too heavy to be a sports bike, and the very upright seating position certainly killed any sporting aspirations. But the GL1000 became a very reliable bike, able to be ridden huge distances without any trouble, and soon aftermarket companies started making touring accessories such as special panniers and fairings. And so Honda started developing the Goldwing into the touring legend we know it as today. On this Goldwing, a Reliant axle has been fitted into the back of the original suspension, and it's given Clive a very useful and workable outfit. I'm just scratching my head as to what the problem may be though, and it sounds as though the carburetors may not be quite set up properly. So that's the first thing I want to have a look at. Right, the first thing I'd like to do on this Trike, Clive, is to have a look at the spark plug colour. Now, I'm hoping that's going to give me an indication as to what's happening with the carburetors. Now, in order to get at the spark plugs, I've got to take these bits of trim off. This is actually a lovely bit of aftermarket tinware that someone's fitted just to make the thing glitter in the sunshine. But just slightly slow the job down. So I've taken those screws out of the top, and now I should be able to very carefully lift that away. Let's make sure we don't drop that and scratch that. That's a nice aftermarket bit of trim. That's the original Goldwing trim. That would have been fitted there at the factory, but the other bit's been added on. Right, now we can see the spark plugs down here. This is the cylinder that we think is running a little bit too rich. So I'm going to take both spark plugs out and let's compare them and see what we can actually see. This particular engine design is what's called a wasted spark ignition system. And what that means is you have one ignition coil that fires two spark plugs at once. So as long as you swap the correct two ignition leads round, it will work fine. Get it wrong and it won't. But, oh dear, they're a little bit tight. It looks like this might have been a while since they've been out. Has this been serviced recently at all, Clive?
I had a friend have a look at it over just before Christmas, but this Fox Jimmy couldn't work out why it wasn't... Right.
Now then, if I just pass that one to you, that actually looks quite black and sooty. That looks far too black and sooty.
So what does that mean?
Something is getting too much fuel into the cylinders. It's a little bit early to say exactly what's causing the problem, but certainly the carburetors are in fact the suspects. Now if you look at that one, you can see the difference. And it looks like there's too much fuel going into that cylinder and not enough into that one. The first thing I'd like to do now is we'll clean those up, and then we'll have a look at the carbs and see if we can improve things. Now, spark plug condition is very important to the running of any engine. Of course, if the plugs get covered in soot, it won't spark properly and the engine won't run properly. Now, even if the fault doesn't lie with the spark plugs, something like carburation can upset the whole system. But the first thing I have to do is clean these spark plugs, make sure they're spotless and I'm getting a good spark. And I'll also be checking the gap on the contact breakers to make sure that the ignition system is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Right, now I've cleaned the spark plugs up, Clive, you can see they look a little bit healthier. That one actually looks to be quite badly worn, but it should still work okay. At some point in the future I'll think about getting some new ones, but this certainly isn't a problem now. But what I am rather concerned about, the spark plug that we took out of that cylinder was very, very sooty, which is what I expected to find. The spark plug that came out of there wasn't. So while I do still suspect there's a problem with the carburetors, I'm wondering now if you may also have an ignition fault. Now what I'd like to do, just before they go back in, is just to test this for a spark, and let's make sure that both of these suppressor caps are sparking as they should. Now, in order to do that, have you ever done this before, by the way? Tested it for a spark?
I've seen them where you ground them out, where you hurt them against the body, yeah?
That's it. What I'm going to do is pop those into there. Then what I'm going to ask you to do, I'm holding those so they touch the engine. Now, if you can turn the ignition on, just spin it very briefly on the starter. Right, that's fine, thank you. Right, you probably couldn't see that from there, but both of these are sparking as they should do. What I'd like to do now is just fire that up and see how she's running. Checking the ignition system like this is a fairly simple procedure, and what I'm actually doing is making sure that everything in the ignition circuit is working as it should, simply by spinning the engine and looking for a nice spark at the plug. If all the ignition components are working correctly, that should be a big fat blue spark, but a lack of spark would mean serious problems in the ignition circuit, and a vague yellow spark would certainly mean that some kind of attention was required. Now, on this type of engine, it's sometimes possible to swap the HT leads around and the bike will still run okay. But by far the best workshop practice is to make sure that everything goes on the way that it came off. Right, just a few minutes for a quick coffee break, and I'm interested to hear how Clive got this Trike. How did he come to be riding this one, Clive?
I've always liked Trikes, and I actually had a motorcycle accident back in 1974, and I actually thought the biking weren't going to happen. You know, I weren't going to go back to bikes because I couldn't hold solo up. And all the Trikes I've seen, they always seem big, complicated machines, and I haven't got the knowledge, skills to build one. Yeah. Eventually, I got in touch with a trike maker in Nottingham. Right. And he said there was an organisation in Manchester called the Disabled Motorcycle Association. Right.
Oh, what, did they actually build this one for you then?
No, well, I've gone off course a little bit. What they did, they actually was trying to find ways of getting a trike made. And then just by chance, I actually saw this one advertised.
Have you managed to do much mileage on it, Clive? Have you been many places?
Yeah, I've done quite a lot. I think I must have put about 3,000 miles on it since July. Yeah. So I'm never off it. Even through winter, I mean, through the snow and everything. Yeah. I haven't. I've been riding it. Only if I've been laid up myself for whatever reason. Right.
So it obviously suits you quite well then.
Oh yeah, I like it. Yeah, and it's a bit of an eye catcher, a bit different. I'm not a poser, but it's.
That's okay. You can be on that. Shall we put back and have a look at these carburetors?
Yeah, certainly.
I've just got a hunch we may have something that we can sort out.
Right, you're talking about it being lubricated. I mean, I've only had the bike since July last year, and I bought a number of books. And in one book, it actually says they've got to be, well, in two of my books, it actually said they've got to be kept really nice and dry.
Some of the manuals say
and then in the other guys are saying, oh, well, what we do, we put some oil on it or some grease or something. Yeah. And I'm just wondering which is the right way to do it. And if you can do that, what's the best one to put on there?
Well, my advice is that you should lubricate them every now and again. Yeah. The problem is you can overdo it, and that's why some of the manuals say that you shouldn't. Yeah. It's also quite important to use the right kind of stuff. If you put heavy grease in there, you can cause more problems than you actually solve. In my experience, the best stuff to use is a silicone aerosol, something like this, and you just give that a little spray like that, and that'll keep it lubricated. You buy this stuff in car accessory shops for cleaning tyres and car upholstery, but this is something else you can use it for. The problem that you'll find, you see, if that does stick in there, and I think this may be what's happening on yours, is you've got 3 throttle slides which are lifting, but if that one's binding, if that one on that cylinder's binding, then it's not enough mixture going into that cylinder. So all the other 3 cylinders on your engine are working fine. They're sucking, charging and burning it nicely. But that one simply isn't delivering enough fuel. So that's definitely something to check out. Now, because we have to set the carburetors up with the engine running, the first thing we've done is brought the Trike outside so we don't get gassed with fumes. Now, what I have done is set up the carburetor vacuum gauges onto the engine like this. Down here, Clive, these are the actual carburetor mountings. And we had some blanking screws in there which allow us to put these adapter pipes on so we can then measure the engine vacuum. What I've done is connected a rubber pipe to each of those adapter pipes, and they lead to these gauges here. Now, when I start the engine up, what that will show us is exactly what the engine's demanding of the carburetors. So if I fire it up, let's see what happens on there. Do you want to press the starter button on that? There we go. Now, if you have a look at that, the first thing I can see is that cylinder is obviously behaving very differently to the other 3.
Erratically, isn't it?
It is indeed. But what I'm going to try doing is just making an adjustment on the carburetor to see if I can bring that cylinder in line with its neighbour. Now, to do that...
Do you want the engine off?
No, leave it with the engine running. We must do this with the engine running. First thing I need to do is slacken that off. And actually, that's already slack. Did you know that?
No.
Right, that's a lock that should be tightened up. Don't worry about it. But if I now make an adjustment to there, can you see that altering the reading on there?
It's moving down, yeah, below the 5, yeah?
And what I'm trying to do is make it behave the same as its neighbour. But I have to say, that does look just a little bit strange. Right. Okay, switch it off there, Clive. What I've tried to do now is make sure these two carburetors are behaving with each other and one isn't fighting against its neighbour, but there may still be some problems with Clive's engine that we don't yet know about. Come back in part 2 and let's see how it rides.